Well, we all heard the very sad news, and if you didn't hear the sad news, that the veteran and the victim of state and Republican collusion, Dennis Hutchings, sadly passed away last night in the Mater Hospital in Belfast. And there's a few interesting points here. First of all, he is the victim of a malicious prosecution, a witch hunt. And not only a witch hunt, I think it's safe to say that the PSNI and the officers that investigated this, and I'm not going to name them in this video, but the officers that investigated Dennis Hutchings, in my opinion, and I'm obviously no legal expert, I'm not pretending to be, but in my opinion, they should hang their heads in shame. There have been numerous investigations, even by the Historical Inquiries team, into Dennis, and none of them found that the bar of evidence was high enough to warrant a prosecution. But all of a sudden, in 2015, two police officers investigated and arrested Dennis for murder. And then, of course, since then, this very, very elderly and sick man has been facing the full force of the British judiciary against him. And it is against him. The court process that Dennis was put through was developed. This is the irony of it. Dennis went to Northern Ireland to prevent terrorism, to support the RUC. And the very legal system that was put in place, that they used to call them Diplock courts. And it was basically a court without a jury. So Dennis was not going to be tried in front of a jury of his peers. And why? Because he wouldn't have got a fair trial anyway. It would have been very difficult for him to get a fair trial in Northern Ireland because of the biases inbuilt in all of us in Northern Ireland. So he was subject to basically a terrorist trial, a judge-only trial. This went on for years. This went on for many, many years. I think the original arrest was in 2015 by these two police officers. So the first point is that the PSNI is once again seen to be, now again, I don't know the ins and outs of the case, but the PSNI is seen to be supporting a Republican agenda and a Republican narrative. It's not an impartial police force. And of course, the irony of this is that years ago, the Republicans would have, I believe, falsely made accusations against the RUC that the RUC was a biased police force. And I think what's happening now is many in loyalist communities are completely losing faith in the PSNI altogether. That's a very dangerous situation to be in. And it's not something I want to see. But to me, there needs to be root and branch reform at leadership level in the PSNI. And the first thing they can do is get rid of that absolute buck Egypt of a chief constable that swanned in from Liverpool. And I can insult people from Liverpool because I was born in Liverpool. But this is too serious to try and be lighthearted about it. But this is a massive issue. And of course, we now know that there are RUC men who are in the frame. And anybody that remembers the Troubles, anybody that served during the Troubles, and I think there, but for the grace of God go I. Because I can think of incidents in Ballymurphy. I can think of incidents in Turf Lodge. I can think of incidents in Armagh and South Armagh, when I was literally seconds away from pulling the trigger. And I'm sure there are hundreds of soldiers can repeat that. Any soldier that served in the front line, so to speak, in Northern Ireland, that was actually out on the streets on a daily basis, at one time or another, will have come very close to firing their weapon. And of course, the yellow card was very specific about how we could fire our weapons. And again, many of these prosecutions, it seems, just the yellow card doesn't matter anymore. The yellow card ceases to exist. We were told that the yellow card was our legal basis for firing our weapons. And even in the 80s, if somebody was throwing a petrol bomb in a way that could have endangered life. Now, it never happened while I was serving in Northern Ireland, but we could have shot people with live rounds if there was no other option to stop someone's life being taken by a petrol bomber. Now, that's what we were told. Thankfully, it never happened, because I wouldn't want to be in Dennis Hutchings' situation. And thankfully, I didn't pull the trigger on those times when legally, according to the yellow card, or according to the legal advice that all soldiers were given, I could have pulled the trigger. I'm not going to say any more about that. But there are thousands of soldiers that went through very, very similar situations. And some of them did pull the trigger. And those men are now being dragged through the courts. Those men are not murderers. Those are men that made a split-second decision. Now, these police officers that prosecuted Dennis Hutchings were talking about the 10 seconds it took for Hutchings to pull the trigger. 10 seconds is not a long time when you're in a high-pressure decision. He was in County Tyrone in the early 70s. I don't know what he'd seen. I don't know what had gone on. I don't know whether he was in Strabane. There was some terrible, terrible stuff happening across Northern Ireland in the 1970s. Mainly Republicans were targeting and murdering soldiers, policemen, Protestant civilians, Catholic civilians, with indiscriminate bombing, with shootings. And this is being airbrushed away. And this is the big picture here. The Republicans want the history books to be written as if the British Army came in and just shot everybody. And nothing could be further from the truth. Because the reality is, and Republicans, you know this, if we'd have taken the gloves off and come after you, we knew where you were, we knew where you lived, many of you were informants, we could have wiped out the IRA overnight. But the British state, the British Army and the RUC did things by the rule of law and did things legitimately. And that great legacy of saving Northern Ireland from civil war, saving many, many thousands of people's lives, is been dragged through the mud by this lawfare. And Dennis Hutchings, I believe, is a victim of British state and IRA collusion. That's what I believe. Now, you can challenge me on that. Thankfully, at the minute, we still have free speech in Northern Ireland. Goodness knows what will happen if we get Sinn Féin running the south and Sinn Féin running the north, or Northern Ireland. Be a terrible situation. But to all my friends in England that are watching this, don't believe the lies of the Republican movement. Don't believe that these malicious prosecutions are anything other than malicious prosecutions. And I certainly, next time I'm in London, will be lifting a pint to Dennis Hutchings in the Union Jack Club. Very dignified man, a very brave man, and a real gentleman, and everything that you'd want a veteran of the British Army to be. And he died away from his family on his own in a Northern Irish hospital of COVID. And I believe he was hounded to his death by the PSNI, by the Northern Irish judicial system, and he was thrown under the bus by people who should have cared for him and should have looked after him. Rest in peace, Dennis. I'll see you all soon.